My Expat Taxes is the most trusted software for U.S. expats. Filing from abroad can be complicated, but My Expat Taxes makes it simple with their award-winning software. E-file instantly and chat with U.S. expat tax specialists. No tax situation is too complicated. Welcome to Global Take, presented by SchoolRubric, a show about the international teaching experience. Teaching internationally is one of the best decisions you can make as an educator. In this show, we will meet teachers and administrators from around the globe living and working internationally. Our hope is that their stories and experiences will inspire you to explore the world of education. We will learn about all aspects of international teaching, from becoming an international teacher to what countries are the best fit for you, to the challenges of being away from your home country. Come take this unforgettable journey to the world of international schools with Global Take, presented by SchoolRubric. Hello, everybody. Happy Pride Month and welcome to Global Take, a show presented by SchoolRubric that connects educators from around the globe. I'm your host, Ryan Sagare. I'm also the co-founder of this nonprofit organization that is really all about connecting people and specifically educators from all around the world. Today is Pride Month in the US, and today we have a show that is related to that. Student-centered diversity and inclusion, practice, and ideas. We've got educators from around the globe. Let me introduce them and have them tell you a little bit about themselves. We are joined today, of course, by, today for the first time ever, 4 others instead of 3 others. I've got Sherri in Vienna, Austria, Caitlin in Zurich, Switzerland, Benjamin in Brussels, Belgium, and Isabel also in Vienna, Austria. And I forgot to say I am in Austin, Texas. But let's start with Sherri. Tell us a little bit about you, Sherri.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Sherri Spelic. I am an elementary physical education specialist at the American International School in Vienna. And I am passionate about diversity and inclusion, how it's practiced in our schools and on an everyday basis. So I'm excited about this conversation and look forward to hearing from my colleagues.
Thank you, Sherri. We're going to go around the room. Let's have Caitlin. Can you go ahead and just introduce yourself also, please?
Hello, everyone. My name is Caitlin Summers. I work at Zurich International School in Switzerland. And I'm fortunate to be a co-advisor of our Sexuality and Gender Awareness Club. Additionally, I teach learning support and English, and I am super excited to hear more from people from around Europe, to just hear what's happening with diversity. It's really the best part of my job, so I'm excited to share.
We're excited for you to share your passion. I'm really excited for these practical and just getting some different ideas from all of you. Benjamin, tell us where you are and a little bit about you.
Hi, I'm Benjamin Doxtdator. I'm at the International School of Brussels in Belgium. I'm a citizen of the United Nations, so that's part of my interest in why we're talking about diversity today. And I also teach English language arts, so a lot of my experience with diversity comes from pedagogy within English language arts.
Yeah, I know that we did a lot of that when I was teaching IB. And speaking of students, we are joined by a student today. I'm so grateful to have a student perspective on today. Isabel, tell us a little bit about you.
Hi, my name is Isabel Iino, and I'm a rising senior at the American International School in Vienna. And I am the co-chair of my school's diversity club, in which we support and embrace all pillars of diversity.
We enjoy having a student perspective, and Isabel is doing this right before she has to take an exam. So thank you, Isabel, for joining us, and we won't keep you too long. I do want to remind viewers that we are streaming this live on Facebook, YouTube, and on Twitter. So, if you're not following us in one of those places and taking a look at our content there, we encourage you to do that. We have this show and a number of other shows that we stream there, and we're all about promoting the voices in education and building this community to learn from each other. Let's get right into the questions and to our first question related to the topic. So can I have the producers roll the question? Question 1, what has been your experience with diversity initiatives and clubs in your current school or other schools? And for this question, we're going to start with you, Caitlin. What is going on in Zurich, Switzerland?
Yeah, so I'm here as one of the co-advisors of our Gay Straight Alliance. The students named it the Sexuality and Gender Awareness Club. So it was started in our upper school, and then we quickly learned, I guess, a year into their group that actually there was a need as well at the middle school level. And that can be touchy depending on leadership and depending on lots of factors. And so we've been super lucky to be supported through this initiative, and it's really grown a lot over the last several years. More and more student-led, I think, at the middle school level, which we're excited about, and I'd love to hear more from all of you about how that works in your schools. And then shall I talk a little bit about my previous roles as well?
Well, let's go around the room. We'll come back to you because I am curious. Just as what you said, I'm curious to hear what's going on in the other schools. And I saw a few people. I saw somebody from Paris tuning in. If you're watching, please, if you have a comment or a question, we'd love to hear from you. Or if you just want to say good afternoon, good morning, or good evening wherever you are. Sherri, I'm going to come to you next about what are some initiatives and clubs that are going on in your school.
Well, I have to say, I almost have to defer to Isabel, because she is the student who approached me about supporting the diversity club at our school. And as an elementary specialist, I'm not as involved with what students are leading. So my 4th and 5th graders are not necessarily, on the top. They're not really. That's not their topic, right? So far. And so for when Isabel spoke to me about the Diversity Club, then we really began to talk about what she felt and her group felt needed doing in the school. So we talked about, how do we get training for faculty, and how do we ensure that the group itself is supported, that students feel supported in their varying identities. So again, I'm incredibly grateful to Isabel, and I'm following her lead, actually.
Well, we'll follow your lead, Isabel. And thank you, Joel, from Kuala Lumpur. And we got somebody joining us from Massachusetts, USA. We appreciate all of you tuning in. It's early in Massachusetts. I know that. So, Isabel, yeah, maybe just if you could talk a little bit about that idea and how you went through the steps to sort of get this club going.
So there was a previous diversity club within our school, but it disbanded a few years ago. So my sister and I, we really wanted to start this initiative again. And it's been really valuable for, I feel like, our whole high school community. And we're now extending to the middle school to have this student-led diversity initiative. And it's really valuable for the teachers and our administration, for the students to understand this is what we want and this is what's happening. And Ms. Spelic and I, we actually had a diversity training earlier in the year. And our experience was that it was really well received, and I felt like we were able to make some sort of impact.
Well, that's what it's about, is having an impact. And I know the next question, I'm going to ask you more about sort of the student drive behind this, and maybe we'll talk about that in the next question. But I do want to hear Ben's perspective over there in Brussels. What are some of the things that you're doing with some initiatives and clubs over in Brussels?
Sure. I'll speak to like my sort of like narrow experience as a classroom teacher in this. I find most of the work I've done has been organic with kids based on what has happened in English. They'll then approach me about things that are on their mind to do with diversity and equity. We don't have a diversity club in the middle school right now. We did have some students this year start a Gay Straight Alliance in the middle school on their own initiative, so that's been fantastic. And then outside of school, I've done some work on like decolonizing education at a couple of conferences. And so at this point, it feels like there are some small organic pockets of things happening. And I'm looking actually to learn from people how to build that and grow that.
And just really quick, Ben, what is the curriculum? Are you guys an IB curriculum, or what's the curriculum that you guys have there? And do you feel like that the curriculum sort of supports that? You're saying that, hey, in the English class, it kind of comes organically. Is that also part of the curriculum is kind of promoting that?
It's mostly been the English teachers I work with who've done that. We've basically written our own curriculum. The top 2 years are IB, but after that, we get to make a lot of choices. And so I'm really lucky to work with some colleagues who are fantastic. And we have taken on doing massive audits for all the books we buy and use. And most importantly, for teaching these things with a critical lens. So explicitly teaching about things like white privilege as a critical lens to read with. That's been transformative. And
has that been your, before we go to the next question, which I know is going to, Isabel, we're going to start with you after the next question, but have Caitlin and Sherri, have you guys felt the same thing? Is it part of the curriculum, embedded in the curriculum, or is that sort of the support that you're seeing within your peers at the school? Caitlin, I'll go to you first.
Okay. Yeah, I think when you said there's small pockets and there's a lot of really good stuff happening, I think that's sort of where we are. There's a lot of really good stuff happening in different pockets. An example, our end of grade 8 project in social studies, they're looking at real world problems and coming up with solutions and talking. So I think there's a lot of cool stuff happening, but I think, that's where we're moving. It's more and more consistency in that, and being really, mindful and making sure that it's super intentional, as opposed to a really good thing happening one day, right?
Yeah, and I want to actually, I want to echo that, because I think we're in a similar position that we're moving in the direction, so that that there are signals in the process of writing and revising curriculum, that we're looking more carefully at how have we, are we practicing diversity? What do our texts show? And so that those things are happening, but it's something that I want to say that it's coming, and it's in process, but we are certainly by no means, we're not there yet, right? So
I know my experience as an international teacher, it seemed like I saw the small pockets, but not a whole school sort of movement in that direction. So I am excited to hear, especially students taking the initiative. And that brings me to my next prompt or question. So I'm going to have the producers roll that, and then we're going to come to Isabel for some of that student perspective. How are diversity and inclusion celebrated at your school? How student-driven are those initiatives? So we're going to start with you, Isabel. So how student-driven is this initiative? It sounds like it's coming directly from you, and then we're going to hear from our other our teacher perspective.
So I would say that the diversity and inclusion initiatives within my school are almost entirely student-driven. And for example, we are starting a middle school class about diversity and inclusion, and this was a diversity club initiative. And on one hand, it's really valuable for the students to be able to come together. Like, diversity club has been the second home within our school for some of us. But on the other hand, because it's so student driven, it's kind of difficult to get things done within our school. Something that would take an administrator an hour to do would probably take us at least like a month. And this is just because, we're students, but it's also really valuable for us to be able to find that like-minded thinking within each other.
And I'm curious, when you had this idea to start this, did you first propose this to, you gathered a few student friends, and then proposed this to and got kind of a teacher on board? Was that sort of the logistics of doing that?
Yeah, so a part of starting a club at my school is you have to have, I think, at least 15 students who are interested in joining the club and a teacher sponsor. So it's not very difficult to start a club at my school, which is really great because things like our diversity club can happen easily.
Very exciting stuff. We have a question from the audience that we're going to get to, but I do want to give everybody an opportunity, and I want to hear from you. So let's go to you, Benjamin. Is it, do you have any students that are taking initiatives at your school regarding diversity and inclusion?
Yeah, we absolutely do. One like sort of side point related to this, I surveyed some of my kids asking them, would you want to join a diversity club and why? And I think the word diversity can be, it can sometimes obscure what we're talking about. So from some perspectives, we're a very diverse school. One of my students answered saying they're one of the very few people of color in our school, and they feel our school is not diverse at all. And so I think it depends when we think of like student-driven diversity initiatives, which aspects of diversity we're talking about. And so this year, some kids in grade 8 started a GSA, and that has been fantastic. I think we're still waiting on and need to help kids to start the things to do more with including Black, Indigenous, and people of color in a diversity initiative.
Lovely. Sherri, would you like to add anything in regards to student-driven initiatives and how it's celebrated in your schools?
Well, following Isabel's lead is one aspect, but I teach in the elementary, and I have to think again about a lot of what happens at that level, right? It has to do with what teachers are doing. What are we offering students? What are we showing them? What are we demonstrating? And so that as educators, we need to be much more intentional about how we bring up topics. And often with elementary students, they will bring the topic to you. They will simply ask you the question, gender. When I ask groups to get into all gender groups, well, what's gender? What does she mean? And then, kids will say, oh, she means boys and girls. And then we'll say, well, maybe you don't have to choose either of those. And then, so the point is that their curiosity is there. And we can talk about those things. It's really about making sure that we're not running away from those topics and putting taboos up. But it's instead opening it up and saying, yes, we're here for this. Yes, and yes, this is PE. And yes, we're going to talk about this. And look, these books are in the library. These are things that we have access to. So that intentionality around what we offer students is really key.
Yeah, and I guess just kind of a quick follow-up. How do you make sure that it's not, when the students come to that with those topics, it can be a little scary for the teacher too, to maybe sort of address some of these topics because they don't feel necessarily comfortable or that they're an expert, or they don't want to say the wrong thing and then have, some parents come to them, hey, this is what's happening in the classroom. So how do you manage that part of it, that piece of it?
I think that's a great question. And I do think that teachers do need to prepare themselves. That means you need to do some reading, subscribe to some outside help, like Learning for Justice website. That's a wonderful organization that provides really on all topics of diversity and inclusion, equity, justice. That's a wonderful resource that you can go to and educate yourselves. So I think we have it. It's necessary for us to educate ourselves. So for me, I've had to learn a ton about, gender awareness and sexuality and what can I, how do I deal with those topics when they come up in my classroom and elsewhere, when I'm passing through the halls. So it is a process where I also need to make an extra effort to make sure that I am informed and that I, find resources.
Well, and if you've got clubs like Isabel started, that also can help with that process. Caitlin, there's a question, and I want to have you start with this question we have from our audience. It's coming from New Jersey, and this is a question that says, how can teachers support LGBTQs and their families and expanding use of pronouns and non-binary language necessary in your younger grades. And this is sort of related to what we were just talking about, right? Like, I mean, these are the sorts of questions as a teacher, I would just, be like, how do I address these things? So I'm going to have you answer this, and then we're going to go to our next question.
I think actually just sort of to piggyback on what Sherri was saying, I think the most important thing to start off is to just be open-minded and be willing to learn and recognize that maybe you don't have the answer right now, but to send the signal to the family, especially the kid, that you are there to learn and you are there to support and respect them. And that you can even say, this is new to me, but I am learning, and be okay with recognizing that you may not have the answers, even though you are the teacher in the room. So I think if you open with that, and I think any teacher can open with that, right? Even if they don't feel like they know how to handle it, or I think in particular with pronouns, teachers can get a little bit stressed about saying the right thing. And so I think it's okay to open with, I'm learning and I'm here to support you. In terms of more specifically with the question, I think it can be tricky. If we're looking at international schools, sometimes it can be related to the laws in the country where you are. And so it's important to read up and learn and understand where you are. But in terms of supporting the student, I think first thing is to make sure that you ask them what they want. You communicate it clearly to the staff at the school. I think we're going to see this more and more, and it's super important that all staff are trained here. And I think in younger grades, it can be even trickier, and I think Sherri kind of touched on this already as well. But it's really about learning, and it's about learning for the adults in the room and also for the kids. And I think there's tons of literature available that needs to be incorporated that will help answer some of these questions. And I think that's a really good starting point for younger grades. But again, it's being open-minded, asking the questions, and showing that you are willing to learn, and that you may make a mistake, but you recognize that and apologize and move on.
Great. Lots of great little pointers here about, making sure that before you dip into these things that you're actually doing some of your own little homework, and then being willing to accept those mistakes. Let's roll our next question. So the producers, can you roll up our next question so we can get to it? Question 3, responses to current events. What do you wonder about and notice in your institution? What forms of student voice have emerged over the last couple of years? Speaking of current events, we're going to come to you, Sherri. It's funny, I was reading my Flipboard this morning and was seeing there's a lot of in the news right now, of course, going on with Pride Month, but, can you talk a little bit about this for us?
I wish I could. The way in which our schools address current events will vary dramatically, and that has a lot to do with the context in which the school is situated, right? So there are lots of factors that determine how a school may respond. How individual teachers may respond will vary a lot in terms of how safe people feel in their environments. What am I at liberty to say to my students, to parents, to whomever? So I do understand the caution and the reservations that may come up. At the same time, I do think that we as individuals can say, here's my take, and still being respectful of other perspectives that exist. So in terms of what a school offers, I think you need to be very clear about your awareness of what the constraints may be. I think you may be in a position to maybe nudge your institution in a particular direction and say, hey, I notice no one commented on this thing. Is something forthcoming? So I think that there are ways to do it, but we always need to be conscious and aware of the context in which we're operating.
You're getting a way to go by Cheryl. So I see you getting some sort of support from the audience members. I know you bring up a great point, and one thing that maybe as we go around the room to think about, I know there's also this idea that when you're working in international school, you're not in your own culture. So there's also some caution that you may have just because you're not, when I was teaching in Brazil, I'm trying to have a little bit of awareness of where I am and not do things incorrectly in the culture where I'm living. So, but I do want to go around the room. Let's, Benjamin, would you like to kind of talk a little bit about the current events and what you guys are doing in your institutions?
Sure. It's a thing where I often feel like I'm going a bit out on a limb, and I would love to see within an institution or even across international schools more coordination about how we respond. There's such a concerted attack on critical race theory, on feminism, on anybody who shares pronouns, that it is sticking our necks out, especially if we're public in places like Twitter. So I would love to see a more coordinated response. We have some kids, if you want to throw the link up that I shared at our institution. They are Reset Revolution. They are on Instagram, and they have been an amazing student-led initiative. They've done this on their own time outside of school. And they look at all sorts of important social issues with other kids from other international schools. And they did great work doing a survey on our high school students and alumni about their experiences with things like racism within school. So they're a place I would go check out for student-led responses to current events.
I love it. Great resource, and we'll make sure we include that even in the description. Isabel, what are some of the things that you see from a student perspective in regards to how current events are being addressed? I'm curious as to what that student perspective is.
So we've actually spoken to the girls at Reset, and it's really interesting to see how they can take real world issues and bring them within the school. My experience, like not as a diversity club president, but as a student, is that I feel when we talk about current events in the classroom, I feel like my knowledge in that discipline could be used to actually make impactful differences, and it's way more engaging. But also, as Ryan said, talking about the cultural differences, especially within international schools where there's so many cultures, ethnicities, and races, there are some things that, while they may be not as popular or widely supported, they are important, and there can only be sometimes one right response to something. Like, even though homosexuality in many cultures and religions is very taboo, while we have to be respectful of all cultures within our school, there's only one correct response to homosexuality within the student body, within the staff. So it's really interesting to see how schools and cultures have to balance this, but I don't know the right answer of how we can do this without having so much pushback or anything like that.
Well, it sounds like initiatives like the club and getting the support of your peers and the teachers in the building is a great step in that direction. Let's roll our last question for today. So producers, let's throw that last question up. What advice would you offer to folks wanting to start or support student clubs or groups focused on diversity and inclusion? Benjamin, let's start with you for this one.
Yeah, my short advice would be to ground it in what you do every day in your classroom so that kids can see you as a beacon, as a safe person to talk to, as somebody who's willing to have those conversations with them. Because what I have found out is those conversations are there amongst the students all the time. They're underground, they are happening. The kids are very aware. And those conversations so rarely make it into the level of our classroom. And if we can get that door open, I think that will help to then get the next door open to things like diversity clubs that is doing.
Great. Caitlin, let's get your little perspective on this, please.
Yeah, I also put a link that you can potentially show up, but I think if you can reach out to colleagues elsewhere and try to connect and learn from the good stuff that's happening in other schools. This is something that we've been working on. So the SGIS Pride Educators Group started as a group of international school educators in Switzerland, but we've been really fortunate to reach out beyond in Europe. And I think we've learned so much from our colleagues at other schools. I think especially when there are current events happening and we're all responding maybe in different ways, and people are nervous to say the wrong thing or do the wrong thing. It's really helpful to connect and hear from our colleagues.
Appreciate that, and we appreciate the resource there. I guess I could probably just say to both you, Sherri and Isabel, since you guys seem to be a team in this, and that's what's really exciting about this, is what advice would you give? And we'll start with you, Sherri.
I'm going to say, listen to students. It seems like the simplest thing, but it's something that for educators, honestly, can be very difficult, that we kind of resist listening to students, especially when they want to tell us something that maybe we're not doing right, or that we are misunderstanding about them and about what they need. And so that listening that is sensitive, that is patient, that is open, that for me is the key. And also be able to follow their lead. So that has been my great lesson with Isabel, because it has just been the best and most rewarding experience. So thank you, Izzy.
Yeah, Izzy, I'm going to come to you, and I love that listening to students, but also I think probably empowering students. How did you feel empowered to actually get this club? I mean, it's one thing to have this initiative, but it's another thing to sort of really drive it and get the support of the school.
So a huge component of my work this year was inspired by Ms. Spelic, and she really empowered me to take initiatives. But I think also another component of what has allowed my club to do well this year was, you know what's right and you know what's wrong. And if you see something wrong within your community, especially if you're a student who's actually affected by it, you have to feel like you can do something. And it's going to be sometimes really hard, and you're going to get pushback, and it might not be the popular thing to do, but you just have to follow your heart, even though it sounds really cliche. And I think that the smaller you start, it builds up. So eventually you'll be able to do something, even if it doesn't feel so critical.
I'm very inspired by you and all of you in the room. I know this is something that I necessarily didn't get talked about a lot when I was in education in international schools. And I think one thing that's really important is having conversations like this and being able to learn from students like yourself, Isabel, and educators like yourself. I have learned a tremendous regarding inclusion and diversity in sort of getting those started in schools. So I want to thank each one of you for joining Global Take today and giving us your perspective. I do want to remind folks also that, the conversation doesn't have to stop here. We do have a Facebook group, and that's our Global Educators Network. And this is a resource, particularly for questions like this, and to get answers and to communicate with educators from around the globe on issues regarding inclusion, diversity, and anything else. So I encourage you all to go there and check out our Facebook group. Again, I also want to encourage everybody. We are all about amplifying the voices in education. We are a nonprofit organization, all about really kind of giving a platform for students, parents, teachers, educators about what's going on in the schools, so that we can hopefully learn from each other and make better decisions for ourselves. So please check us out on our YouTube channel. Also, you can find us at SchoolRubric.com. We will be here next week for the final session of Global Take before we take a little break during the summer. So I encourage you to join us next Thursday for what'll be an episode, and then we'll have a little break. But it's been a great season of Global Take because of people like you. So thank you so much for joining me, Sherri, Benjamin, Isabel, Caitlin. Really enjoyed your perspective, and we'll see you at the next Global Take. Thank you all. Thank you so much. Thank you for watching School Rubric on YouTube. Make sure that you like, follow, and subscribe in order to stay looped in on all of our diverse collection of shows, interviews, panels, tutorials, and more from educators around the globe. And visit us at SchoolRubric.com for even more great content, such as our online articles, Interact magazine, featured podcasts, and more. Thank you.